How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I bring you a very interesting and timely video is the way that I would describe it. I mentioned in my last video about how you definitely need to circle that date, August 14th, because there are some crazy things that very well could go down. And despite saying that, despite being aware of the date, I had no idea the craziness and the wild beginnings of RosterMania heading into Modern Warfare 2 day one. And it is all out chaos. Constant players have announced free agency. You can see organizations are already in the works of who to resign, who to let go, who do we want to bring back for this next season. And I thought that it'd be interesting, instead of trying to recap, oh, this player's a free agent, this guy's a free agent, what this could mean team wise, what could happen there. I thought it'd be more fun to talk about one player in specific, a guy who has been in the news a lot recently, given his podcast appearance and given his run with New York last year. Today, we're talking about the GOAT. Today, we're talking about Mr. 30+ championships, Mr. 3 rings, Ian Crimsix Porter. Where is this guy headed next season? Feels like, and it just sounds like, his relationship with New York is over. I don't think there is any way that that's going to happen again. I don't think there's any way that he comes back to the subliners for next season. And so I thought it'd be interesting, right, to kind of put in play, almost have like a simulation of what could be next year for Crimsix. So what I did was I put down a list of teams who obviously still have some players. Some of these organizations technically don't have any players right now. And I just wanted to match up what I feel like actually could work. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And the first team, the first organization, the first franchise that we're going to talk about is the Minnesota ROKKR. Now, Minnesota have already made it known that they have basically completely cleared the board moving into next season. They had Attach and Standy, who were unrestricted free agents. They've allowed for them to go ahead and move forward. Havoc and Priesta, who were considered restricted free agents, Minnesota said, you know what? We're not interested in, at least for right now, keeping these guys moving forward into next season. So they've allowed for them to become unrestricted free agents as well. So all 4 starters that ended the season for Minnesota are no longer tied to the team in any way. The only player who currently sits on this roster is Fame, who is a substitute player still for Minnesota. Now, it's not just because Minnesota has 4 open slots that I would say, oh yeah, Crim fits perfectly here. But I do think that from an organization point of view, from what Crim is looking for in an organization, I feel like Minnesota checks off a majority of those boxes, if not all of the boxes. ROKKR have shown to be a phenomenal organization. I don't think we've ever heard a player say a negative thing about the team, the front office, the management, the staff behind them. And it feels like lately, that has become a major talking point for Crim. It feels like he did not have a great time with New York, whether it's the players, the management, whatever it may be. And so it feels like maybe moving to Minnesota, the team who has a great history in that regard, could be the perfect landing location for somebody like him, to make sure that that is already set in play. And then with that, maybe even having the keys to the franchise, if they were not to have a guaranteed, player to start off with, Crim could be their guy. Now, I will say, I feel like Minnesota's first priority as of this moment, just from speculation, for what it seems like on the timeline, rumors, all that stuff, to me, it feels like Attach is their first option. They want to try and sign Attach no matter what. He had a great end of the season. Ever since he had that AR in his hands, it felt like he was putting up great numbers. It felt like he was doing pretty much whatever he wanted to do on the map. And so it feels like, at least in my eyes, given Attach, who is an easy to work with player, a veteran, a great content guy, an easy player to work with on the team, it seems to me like the easiest option for Minnesota is just to sign him back. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of organizations giving him a call, but if they can work that out, I think that Minnesota, their goal, no matter who is obviously on the table, is to get Attach back, and especially in that flex position. Now, the positive for Crim is that he can run either the flex or the AR, the exact same thing as Attach. Attach can run the main AR or the flex. I think both players would rather be in their respective roles. I think Crim would much rather be in main AR, obviously depending on how Modern Warfare 2 plays, and Attach, at least for now, would rather be in the flex role. So instantly the roles make sense, and I think from at least Crim's perspective, I can't say the same thing about Attach, but Crim, essentially, in the interview that he had on the flank, it feels like he wants to be back with at least some veterans. He wants to be back with somebody who he can mesh with, somebody who's able to take that constructive criticism. And obviously Attach is somebody who's been around for a very long time. As I said, it feels like he's somebody that's easy to work with. And then from there, if that relationship is able to work, and I think Crim would be happy to play with a player like Attach, then it's really about the SMGs. It's a hard conversation to have, right? Because if you do have Crim and Attach on your roster, you know, maybe you give a call back to Standy, maybe you give a call back to Havoc. At the same time, I don't know if those two players would mesh greatly with Crim, especially Havoc, obviously with his, you know, twit longer that he had about the reason why he didn't want to join the subliner. So I feel like that instantly doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You could bring in Standy, you know, some SMGs who are already announced or that could be, are players like Bance and Afro. Maybe you look at the challenger side of things. Again, it feels like it would be something that you'd have to think about for the future, maybe a conversation that happens a long time from now, and that's more clear as more free agents begin to announce themselves or teams make things more clear. But again, I feel like from the Minnesota perspective, this could be one of the best options for a player like Crim, given if Minnesota is interested in his services, because of the fact that, again, you have an organization that I think has great merit, somebody that Crim would be interested in. On top of, you're able to play with a very talented flex player who feels like he's at the top of his game and attached, somebody who's easy to work with, and somebody who's also a vet. Feels like 3, 4, 5 things that are very important to Crim. They're already off the table, or rather, they're on the table, things that he gets on top of the SMGs, which again would be a big deal. And depending on the signing dates, depending on how all this order of operations begin to work, that could be something that changes or makes things more interesting. But I feel like Minnesota could be a great option for somebody like Crim. Next up, we're going to talk about the LA Guerrillas, another team that also happened to miss out on champs, is LAG. And as of this moment, the current roster moves that, like I said, as of the recording of this video, the only moves that they have officially announced are the fact that Gunless is an unrestricted free agent. Obviously, he was on the bench to close out the year, and that Coach Bevels is also out of the picture as well. Now, obviously, we know, right? Coming into from Cold War, coming into Vanguard, LAG made a huge roster reset, right? They had a squad wipe. They brought in some players. They brought in some veteran type players, and, you know, they'd go on to win Major 2. And after that, it was just a downward spiral, right? You know, things just did not work out well. You heard a lot of the players, you know, discuss things as time went on about, you know, whether it was practice, whether it was just, you know, players not being dedicated, whatever it may be. There was roster changes that happened toward the end of the year, all kinds of stuff. It felt like they were trying to figure out and solve a problem that just could not be solved. And so that's why I feel like LAG didn't just make a huge reset last year, but are also going to have a very similar massive reset coming into this next season too. And that very well could open up the door to somebody like Crim. Now, the problem, I guess you could say, with maybe Crim coming to LAG is the fact that Slasher exists. Slasher is on this team. And if these two guys were to be alongside of each other, how does that work, right? Because Slasher had a great end of the season. It felt like everybody on LAG was struggling but him. Slasher and Crim, a duo that I feel like never would really want to be with each other, that would never really want to team up. I don't know. It feels like they might have similar mindsets as of this moment. Two guys who are very frustrated, guys that have won championships, even have success winning world championships, combining together as your main AR and your flex, however it would work. And maybe they move forward a part of LAG together and they pick up some SMGs, maybe bring in some SMGs that are already a part of the team, and they move forward that way. It's hard to bring up because I just don't know how that would work, but it feels like Slasher, who's frustrated because teams just aren't working, or rather the current team just isn't working. And then Crim is coming from a very frustrated moment, you know, position, dealing with young players and you know, different things like that. It feels like their mentalities could match up quite well right now. Neptune and Crim reuniting, you know, it felt like they, you know, managed to kind of get on the same sheet of music finally after a lot of Twitter beef. When it came down to the flank, it feels like things are maybe better, but I just don't know if they're ready to be on the same team again, if that is possible. And then Hook and Crim, I don't know. Time does heal, but I just feel like their run back with Dallas Empire and Cold War, I don't know if that necessarily meshes either, if again those players are still going to be on the team. And so I don't know, maybe it could be a combination of Crim and Slasher as the ARs, then you bring in some SMGs, which again is a difficult conversation to have. Or maybe it's a matter of letting go of Slasher if they decide to maybe give Crim the keys to the organization. So Crim is either the main AR or the flex. Maybe they keep Spart, you know, in the flex role, and then we're talking about SMGs again. Maybe it could be Neptune, maybe it's Hook, maybe it could be Asim. I think Asim and Crimsix actually would play very, very solid together. So that could be an option. And then we start talking about, you know, Standy. Maybe we talk about some challenger players, you know, the Vehicles, the Exceeds of the world. And then you start to have that combination of players as well. So I feel like it could work. I don't know 100% because I feel like Slasher is still going to be a part of this team. And despite what could be a match of mentality. I just don't know about those two combining together, or at least maybe LAG being cool with allowing for that to happen either. Now, one of the last teams that we're also going to discuss, and a team that actually, as of recording this video, I had to make a quick pivot, is the Florida Mutineers. They just announced basically a full squad wipe. I literally have written down in my script, it feels like something is right around the corner with the Florida Mutineers, because Skies and Awakening were by definition unrestricted free agents coming into this offseason, and the Florida Mutineers have made it known that not only are Awakening and Skies not going to be at least on the team for the moment, but neither is Major Maniac. Same thing when it comes down to their substitute in Yeez, and also with their new addition in 2 Real. So all those things in mind, there is one man who currently sits in the Florida Mutineers, the bench at least as of now, and that's Dave Patty. Again, no idea what happens with Dave Patty. I know they signed him last year, so maybe he had a 2-year deal. Again, not really sure what happens with that, at least as of this moment. But if we are talking about Florida, maybe a franchise who's looking to start things over. Now that the Skies and Awakening era is over, maybe they look toward a player like Crimsix to kind of restart what is a new generation, or a new era of the Florida franchise. One thing that I think is actually really cool, if this were to go down, is that Crim would be working alongside a great GM in ROKKR. There is a lot of mutual respect between those two players. You know, it feels like maybe the underlying, one of the major motivations for Crim, at least I know seasons ago, he talked about how he wanted to achieve being considered the greatest controller player of all time, the greatest controller FPS player to ever exist. And for many, and 100% still agree, is ROKKR, given his run, you know, in the Halo titles. He transitioned during the CDL times to the Florida Mutineers, and he's been the GM ever since. So Crim basically being able to play alongside, or rather play underneath a player like ROKKR, given that mutual respect, and just really given the camaraderie I'm sure that the two share, would be interesting. And you know, in the Flank podcast, he talked about how GMs are so important. He really values, you know, players or members like Hastro and Hex, what they bring to the team, how involved that they are. It feels like ROKKR could maybe be another piece to that list for Crim as well. Now, it feels like over these past few seasons, the Mutineers have almost been a different type of team to a lot of rosters out there. You know, they've definitely had a younger vibe, if you'd like to call it that. You know, many criticisms on this Mutineers team. It's not just been inconsistency over these past few seasons, but it's also been, at times, the lack of veteran leadership. They've had it, they've allowed for it to go. It feels like the younger side of things continued to be where they molded. They brought in a player like Major Maniac, who by no means is like a seasoned veteran, but somebody who was more of a stable voice. So if that is the trajectory that Florida realized, maybe, hey, you know what, if they look back and they say, hey, you know, Skies and Awakening, it just didn't really work out with you know, this era of team. Maybe the reason for that was because of the lack of veteran leadership. And so maybe they instantly want to start this new process off with one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player of all time, with somebody who has arguably more experience than basically anybody. Maybe that's the way that they look. Now, it would be a major, you know, culture shift, you know, given, like I said, the fact that you've got a younger coach, you've had, you know, players who have been more of this younger generation, and now you're bringing in somebody like Crim. It would definitely be different. And given that at this moment, technically Florida do not have any players signing on to the team, you could really make a list of whoever you'd like, whether it be Crim, maybe you bring in a flex like Attach, maybe Priesta. It could be a great option for him to now venture from Minnesota over to the Florida Mutineers, if that's just not happening with ROKKR anymore. And then again, the SMG conversation, as I said, is extremely difficult. You can bring in challenger players. You could be looking at, you know, Bance or Standy or Yeez or whoever. The list really truly goes on of currently announced SMG free agents, but it could be a good destination for Crim. Again, Florida feels like the GM side of things could be a great connection there. If the Mutineers do decide to say, hey, you know what, doors are open, let's bring in Crim, let's allow for him to not just make our organization you know, that much more in the spotlight, but let's allow for what has been a good but not as good as we would like last few seasons. Maybe the one thing that's been holding us back is the lack of having a stable veteran. Now we bring in somebody who is going to do that and really show whoever we bring in how to play Call of Duty the right way. Now, I'll be honest with you, the last team that we're going to talk about, it's a hard sell, the Seattle Surge. I have said this on numerous occasions. I feel like Accuracy's role when it comes down to these three other players has been so valuable. It almost feels like he is the perfect player to be a part of these other three, to be a part of this team, you know, to be the father, if you will, the codfather of these younger school players. Do I see a world in which Crim can maybe do the same thing I do? You know, when we talk about Seattle Surge, and really the only reason why I'm talking about Crim possibly joining this team is that Seattle, the issue they had last year was the ability of being inconsistent, you know, going from first place finishes to last place, going from, you know, great results, taking down some of the best teams in the league, to then falling to, you know, the lowest of the low type of rosters as well. So maybe the one thing that Seattle looks back at this year and says is that, hey, you know what, we had a great way to close out the year at champs, but are we really going to improve that much moving into this next title? Are we going to have that same up and down type of success, maybe moving into a 2-year title? If that is going to be the case, maybe now is the time to change things up. Maybe the young guns have learned all that they can from accuracy, and now it's time to bring in somebody like Crim, who is going to be, I don't know, more of a drill sergeant type, somebody who's going to be on these guys. And it feels like always for Crim, he's talking about the how to play the right way. It feels like at times Seattle lacked the ability to play fundamentally right in the crucial and clutch situations. Again, they were at times magnificent in those moments, and sometimes they were not. Do I think it could quickly evolve into maybe the young guns versus Crim if Crim gets on the wrong side of these players? Potentially. There's also a world in which I feel like, you know, they have that respect for accuracy. Can they have that same respect for Crim? Yeah, you know, maybe if you know, we talk about Sib, Pred, Mac, maybe they want somebody to maybe they're comfortable, right, with having a older school mentality of having somebody be hard on them, be rough on them. That's the way that Shotzi and Illy worked back with Dallas Empire. That was the big thing that they talked about, was that, hey, we were able to take criticism from these veterans and it helped shape who we are today. So maybe it could be that same type. Also, Dallas Empire didn't end out the greatest way for Crim either, so it's a difficult sell. Do I think it's likely? No, but it could be an option for Crim, so I definitely wanted to mention it here on the Seattle Surge. Alrighty, guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have not done so already, make sure to like and also subscribe to the channel. There's only going to be more off-season content as things continue to heat up and RosterMania continues to get even more crazy. Also, make sure to leave down a comment on where you think that Crim could be headed when it comes down to next season. Is it one of the rosters that we talked about? If so, why? Love to hear your guys' thoughts. And that is going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in, and I'll see you back here on the channel very soon.